Welcome. This is the podcast series dedicated to living a revenue culture. We've learned that everybody wants to make the most money possible, but in order to do that, you really have to figure out how to optimize your people. And if you're going to optimize your people, you have to do that in a low friction context. Can't put a bunch of really talented people in a crazy place and expect them to do wonderful stuff. So we bring you people to a month that are out there in the real world working on the same things. And today we have Melisa White with us. And Melissa and I've worked together now for, I guess, over a year. And this is going to be a really interesting podcast today. There's going to be a lot of really powerful, energized kind of things coming out of it. Melissa is someone who can't help but question the status quo. And she uses data and science and all kinds of investigative tools to understand what's going on. And I guarantee you, she is always going to advocate for justice. She believes in almost that we're all capable of doing just some amazing things if our level of awareness and our energy to grow is there, and we're willing to embrace change and avoid passivity. I can't even say that this morning because that creates mediocrity, and that is the silent killer of potential. Now, in addition to that, Melissa's maybe one of the one or two best enterprise salespeople I've ever seen, and she has an international background of doing really cool work that you're going to love to hear. So, welcome, Melissa.
Wow, what an intro. Thank you so much, Rick.
So, you have to share your background, both, you have lived in many cool places and you have a career that's just amazing. So, share your background and how you got to where you are today and tell us where you are today.
Okay, so I'll try to track where the questions are in order. So half Singaporean, half Kiwi. My dad was in the New Zealand Army, and so met my mother there. And we lived in Australia. I have a sister that was born in Sydney. I have a sister that was born in Texas. I have sisters that were born in Indonesia. Yeah, we've roamed around quite a lot. But I think that at in my core, I'm a New Zealander, even though I do have this Singamera Kiwi accent. Um, and I'm presently based in the UK, which is where I moved over. I transferred when I was at Gartner out of the Singapore office over to London in order to support my grandparents who were living here at the time.
Yeah. So,
So,
talk
but
about a little bit about your work history because that's equally cool.
okay, well, I had a passion for education actually and learning and teaching from a young age. And I got into at university, though I didn't finish, I studied education and psychology. And then I landed in sales without really meaning to through a contact that I had while I was working part-time in New Zealand. And that was in the car industry. So I got into I was doing some well, I think I was doing reception at the time. Sorry, I started at reception, then got into the finance department and started covering for the finance manager and was like, wow, this is really cool. And forget about university at this point, by the way, because then I was really, really excited by this. Got an opportunity to work for Toyota, and they said, you have to sell new cars for 3 months before you can be our business manager. Bearing in mind, I had no experience. So the fact that I even had this opportunity was really cool. But I was like, I don't know if I could sell cars. There's always like this thing about car salespeople. Anyway, it was the best decision I ever made because I learned amazing training through Toyota. And also, Toyota brand new vehicles are incredible and they go forever. So, really easy to sell. Anyway, ended up in the finance department after successfully selling for 3 months in new cars and loved it. Had super fair leasing prices. I was converting people away from the traditional cash buyers, which were usually putting it on the mortgage and whatnot. And then I was recruited away from Toyota to Ford and Mazda, which my dad used to have Mustangs. So I was really excited to work at Ford. Anyway, um, I started feeling like my IQ was maybe decreasing if like without being, and it was just probably not a very stimulating environment for me. And I was able to make money for dealerships, but I needed a bit more of a challenge. And so I spoke to a recruiter and they recruited me into recruitment. I was in recruitment for about 5 years, but was also moving on to the contract roles, realizing that it was more exciting working for like engineering companies. Sorry, I'm going really, really long winded on this. Long story short, recruitment was super easy for me. So then I thought, what? And I had worked myself out of a contract with a healthcare organization because I recruited too many people within the contract time frame. And so their ISP provider, their telco provider was looking for a business development person. I thought I knew nothing about IT. In fact, I'm a technophobe, but technology is constantly evolving. And so it is highly unlikely I'm going to get bored in that role. And next thing you know, I've moved from New Zealand to Singapore to London and have worked with some of the biggest organizations in the world in technology advisory at Gartner was where I finished off.
Wow. Wow. And it sounds like curiosity and learning is really important for you.
Yeah, my tagline used to be always learning because it's true. If I think I even I say to my therapist, who I still like I see once a month for emotional and mental well-being. I'm like, every single session that I have with him, I learn something new. And I think that that's what we should be doing whenever we spend time with people. How can we learn? How can we grow? How can we improve? It's definitely a lifelong pursuit.
That's a great intro because one of the things you and I have talked about frequently is purpose. And in our work, in the revenue game and in smart application of smart route, purpose is one of the very first things that we focus on. Tell us about your purpose because I know all of that conversation was about work, but I know part of the reason you're in England and UK is because of some things with your grandparents and some things you saw that were really important. And so you combine when you're happy in work, my guess is you're aligned with your purpose. Am I on the right path?
Yes, 100%. And I think that that's actually what I didn't realize until after I had left my corporate roles, that being totally in alignment with who I am as a person, which is standing up for injustice and finding the truth and transparency and also driving change, all of these impact-based initiatives is really at the core of who I am. And I moved to the UK because my grandparents were really struggling with their home here in the UK. They have a leasehold property, which most of your viewers are not going to know about, but basically it's a system that only exists in England and Wales. And which gives them very little control over their property. And my grandmother couldn't really manage a lot of the interactions with the organization. So when I moved over, it was more for emotional support. But then after my grandfather died, I thought, how is it possible that no platform or system exists to help support the millions of people here in the country who are struggling to understand their rights, get access to real support and champion their effectively, you know, champion them to have fairness and justice with something with such a big investment. So I went down the startup route and thinking just that I've always been successful in every role and overachieved. I went in with all confidence and absolutely no idea on how to execute. So it was a major wake up call, a very big humbling experience, but I'm still going. I haven't given up yet, and that's 3 years on now.
And one of the other things that I know you and I have talked about before that I'd like to have you share because I think it's part of your purpose and your skill set and why you've been so successful. You talk about intrepid thinking, and why don't
Mm,
you share a little bit about that with us?
sure. So I came up with the concept of intrepid thinking because as you know, when I started diving into the science and of how our minds work and our personalities and what makes us tick, I became obsessed with the different, I get the characteristics that some people have over others. What drives certain people to move forward while others freeze within inaction. And I had always been really bold and courageous with the way that I either moved to Singapore on a commission only role in one of the most expensive countries in the world, knowing nothing about how to sell networking equipment or even knowing anything about networking equipment, but believing that I could. And so that really became quite interesting for me. And as I started talking to more and more leaders or people who have gone out there and achieved pretty remarkable things, I became fascinated with their common mindset that would typically mean that even if they were feeling unsure about something, or even if they weren't 100% convinced, which of course we can't be, that something was going to work, trusting in themselves and their belief system and that it was for a bigger purpose than themselves and pushing forward anyway. Um, yeah, that's kind of how the concept of intrepid thinking came to be.
Well, and that's one of the reasons I'm glad you're on the podcast because when we talk about um, the whole concept of living a revenue culture, and everybody says, well, they want the maximize profit part. They forget you never get there until you optimize people. And I know you have experience in DISC and other methodologies, and you have worked with neuroscientists to put some of these pieces together. Um, so talk a little bit about, I know you constantly think about optimizing yourself, but you also are always asking, how can I expand this into others? So, talk a little bit about how you apply those sciences and how they've helped you in your own optimization.
Okay, well, so firstly, when I discovered DISC, I was working as a sales consultant and delivering training for some very aggressive growth organizations to support my startup that that wasn't making any money yet. And I saw and I ran several hundred of these because I say several hundred because it was definitely over 300 of these disc profiles for salespeople that were selling up to $80 million deals. And what was so fascinating was people who hadn't had the opportunity to do their disc personality profile and have a look at their strengths and their limitations and where some of their blind spots were, didn't realize that they were not actually working to their fullest potential. And that lack of self-awareness, and can I say it was life-changing for myself, because had I realized that my very, very low compliance was a thing, had my managers at Gartner realized that my very low compliance was a thing, there wouldn't have been so much friction and misunderstanding within the organization. They would have had me focus more of my time and efforts on what would have made them even more money and supported me in the areas that I wasn't strong in. So I just became obsessed with ensuring that people were aligning their roles and and what they were doing on a day to day with what was what filled them with fulfillment, I guess, but also where their natural strengths lied, so that they were just in natural flow state and not expending a ton of energy. And they were able to go and give more to organizations rather than hating life every day when you show up for work. It was it that the personality profiling was a game changer. And I think if every organization isn't implementing it, it's a mistake. But so that's how I started it. And then I started looking at how could I left so everybody from a disc perspective, lots of people, MBTI, there's lots of personality profiling out there, but it's what do you do with it? And then I started becoming really interested in the diversity mindedness of organizations, and how could you, leveraging the scientific tools, be able to demonstrate that the lack of change or the lack of innovation was likely because there wasn't diversity within the groups of decision makers or team players. So there was no healthy friction, or but there was also no movement in challenging the status quo.
Yeah. One of the things I've been measuring for 30 years is what we call the cost of the chaos to produce revenue. And when you really start to analyze the cost of chaos, the the single biggest cost of chaos in most organizations we describe as cross silo conflict. But what that really is exactly what you were talking about. It's individuals in the wrong place being managed by the wrong people to accomplish the wrong things, and you're not helping them um, deliver in the areas where they're excited and they're wanting to be innovative and collaborative, and they're wanting to develop new things. And so, that's there's we've learned in the last 5 years how when people follow the path you're prescribing, the capacity for the person to both enjoy their job and be more productive in it is amazing. Their capacity can go up, to numbers that are hard to imagine when we look at organizations that have highly engaged people. They're 4 times more engaged than most organizations. And you're going, wow, no wonder they make so much money and they have so little turnover.
Right. Well, and it's not only the stuff that they do well. So I think that just in society in general, there's a huge lack of self-awareness. We're so busy focusing on our external and what things can kind of serve us in achieving things, without realizing that we actually have everything that we need inside ourselves. And so when we then become aware of some of those limitations, let's say that you've always wanted to be an engineer but you're not great with process, all of a sudden you're able to say, okay, I really want to go down this track, but I'm not great here. So then you've got a blueprint of, I need to work on these, actively practice these things in order to improve. Or let's say I always have conflict with a certain kind of personality because I'm too direct, and they may, become triggered or offended by
Yeah.
my style. If I'm not considering other personalities, knowing that I need them in order to, deliver projects or get things done, if I'm not being conscious of how other people show up, then I need to go work for myself because nobody will want to work with me. And that really is, you know, what this whole the behavioral analysis helps people to see at a super high level. But it's, what do you do with all of that? And the cost of chaos, what you're talking about, Rick, not only between different silos, but when people aren't understanding. So everybody's showing up as an individual to work, and everybody wants to be successful, but we're all different. So just because a role and maybe a job description has been written for personality type or behavior A, you may have exceptional skills that you're bringing into the organization. If you don't adapt or ensure that they're aligned to the purpose and the vision of the organization, but also the they have the ability to show up as their natural self and bring their natural style to the party, then there's going to be friction within teams as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Kind of taking that and combining it with some of your global experience, do you find that the applying like disc type thinking, the understanding and the analysis, is there any global boundaries in that, or is that something that applies everywhere?
Well, we all have personalities, I hope. So I think that you can do it everywhere. And actually, when I learned about DISC, I was speaking to ex-colleagues in Singapore, and at university, a National University of Singapore, I believe, they have an understanding of DISC. What often people don't do though is, and because recruiters use personality
Yep.
profiling all the time, but people just take these reports and then they think, oh, okay, they may or may not do something about it. They may or may not be like, oh gosh, I didn't realize those things were about me. What people don't realize or may forget is that we can change any component of our personality that we want to if we wish, if we really put in the effort. If we want to be a salesperson and we're fearful of networking and speaking and presenting, we have a decision that we can actively practice behaviors that will change our brain, like the programming, in order to become more like the person that is aligned to what we really want to do. And so now, culturally, though, there are definitely personality types that are inherently more, I guess, kind of developed in different cultures. So in the UK, for instance, conflict is a really bad thing. And speaking, saying how you feel and, kind of like just it's not it's not commonplace. So they see Americans as, oh gosh, they're overly confident. They're just like just telling us what they think. And when in actual fact, so they may appear more extroverted and more high on the influence if you're looking at disc, but it's an environment that allows for that kind of freedom of being able to share and openly express yourself versus other cultures that don't have that.
So I'm going to jump now.
Yeah.
One of the things in Smart Rev and revenue science we talk about is value transfer. And I love your introductory story of where you started and the journey you've been on. And one of the things that just jumps out of the story is you continually figured out how to transfer value to other people, and sometimes, and one of the things you're talking about the car dealership and in the financial office of the car dealership. Now, I don't know, I've never bought a car in New Zealand, but I bought over 100 new cars in the US, and I love buying cars. I hate going into the finance office. So I'm just trying to imagine how you thought, because it sounds like you part of your success was helping the customer who came into the finance office make the best possible decision for themselves, yet you were making money for the car company. How do you think about value transfer in your career in general? And how do you help some of your clients learn to do that because you're a master at
So I can't do anything that I don't believe in. And I never ripped anyone off. So I was really proud of, some car dealerships that would have ridiculous interest rates and charge whatever they could, or I never did that. I had a set price and that was the same throughout business. I've always been really fair with what I did, but I believe in the value that I'm delivering. Now, if you're looking at a depreciating asset like a car and someone's putting that on their mortgage to pay it off for 30 years or 20, another 20 years, for a car they're going to have for 5 years, that's actually a really bad financial decision. And so you're better off paying a little bit more interest. And so I've always believed in what I've I've sold, but I've and so I think that having that integrity of truly believe, like at Gartner, was anybody going to lose their job because they didn't have access to the library of Gartner research and
it.
information? Of course not. However, I made their service so valuable to them that they then became dependent on my service in order to do their job better, faster, smarter, any of those things. And so I think that as a salesperson, you need to be able to figure out how to take whatever it is that you're you're providing to your customer and be able to articulate that and paint it in a way, not paint it because it has to be authentic and real, but help them see what they can do with that. And I guess maybe one of the most tangible examples would be when I got into the telco space and I I was selling services to other providers. I started selling wholesale services. I was helping my wholesale clients productize their telco offerings and think of ways to sell to different customers and package things up so that all of a sudden they needed more of my service in order to fulfill the new products and services that they were pushing out into the market. And so if you're really supporting your clients in being successful, at the end of the day, that's really what it is. If you're supporting people in being successful, they're 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 going to continue buying from you.
Uh, Thank you for that. That's just such a great story. Um, I know you realize when we work with clients or people that we're helping to apply smart rev and revenue science, it's this combination of always about buyer back. And in your story, you're going to your buyer not to sell them your product, but to help them have a better business because they partner with you and you're not just doing it short term, you are helping them figure out how to have a new business model that has a long term impact on them and their clients. You were even bringing more value to their clients by your customer working with you. And that value transfer is really cool because it goes through like four levels and all of you are better off.
Right. And but those sales, especially, those deals take longer and it's harder because so here's an example. I'm working with a client right now who has a software solution that they're selling into um, the housing associations here in the UK. And nobody really cares about that product, to be honest. But it does cause a lot of issues, but it's lower down the priority list. So I think of what are the things that we can be enabling them with that has nothing to do with our solution, but that helps us be seen as a partner to their organization so that we're either providing them with insights, additional partnerships, a totally different services that we weren't even considering selling. And yes, we can the service that we initially went there for is still there, but all it's all of a sudden look It's how can you become a trusted partner to organizations when there are a million people that they could be working with?
Well, and you're again, you have such wonderful examples of a couple of things there. One is the fact that sometimes we think we're there to sell a product. The buyer is really hoping we have an offer that includes your product, but it also includes your business model. And it also includes, the other services that may come with it that turn it from a maybe someday I need this to the whole package is really exciting and interesting and becomes fundamental to me. And so mixing the technology with the business model and thinking it as value to that end buyer changes everything in a lot of cases.
And you may not have anything else other than just one thing to sell them. But how can you demonstrate your value by connecting them with who they need to speak to? Or how can you partner with who else they need to bring into the picture to give them an all-in-one solution? So I think it's really thinking outside the box and not being transactional in the way that you're
Yes.
thinking.
Yeah. Well, and you're demonstrating really clearly when we talk about buyer back, all those things you talked about became important because you understood the buyer so well that you knew this connection or this information or this partnership would make their world better. And if you don't know those things, then it's really, really hard. So this has been great. And I have just a couple of things to ask you before we wrap up. Um, thinking about the combination of understanding international enterprise value transfer and bringing it down to where you were back in the day, where you were still in school and trying to decide, do I want to go to work for Toyota and build my career in something I'm loving, or do I want to go back to the classroom and sit there and have somebody try and teach me something I don't want to learn? Uh, Give us your advice. What would you suggest to young people who are early in their career, even pre-career, and they're trying to decide where they want to go, and they're trying to balance purpose and money and engagement and all those things in their head? What advice do you have for them? And then the second half is, what advice do you have for the people that they could go to work for who would be hiring them?
Mm. So I'm very passionate about youth because I think that not enough support from between corporate or work, the working environment in school, there it's such a big leap. And had I not through just a series of accidents gotten the opportunities that I had gotten, I would never have known all of the things, because I guess I kind of fell into something and then the next thing kind of recruited me and I was always kind of headhunted, if you like, rather than going after them. But I always believed that I could. So I would probably start with that. Do you believe, firstly, that no matter what you try, it doesn't matter if you're going to be amazing at it or not, that the lessons that'll come from it will be valuable to you. So it even if you're not great at whatever you put your hat in the ring for, I'd go an intern. I'd have at least maybe 4 or 5 different short stints of working in totally different industries. If I was to go back and do it all again, because I always dreamed of getting into trading, finding out how do you get, just because I'd be a squillionaire, I think, if I had gotten into that earlier. Um, how do you learn from people that may have the perfect opportunity for you, it's really going and testing the market, going and getting and offering to make teas and coffees, not coming out of school and thinking that you should be earning like 5, 6 figures straight away. Go and make coffees and do the hard yards of really, getting to understand an industry before you jump into it. The other thing though that I think set me up for a lot of success is that I spent quite a bit of time volunteering and helping others. So I'm talking about helping the homeless, helping at refuges, seeing what it means to have things hard, because you really learn to appreciate how lucky you have it. And I think that probably the number one thing that keeps me going and that has kept me going has been gratitude. No matter how
Yeah.
difficult things have gotten, being grateful for what I have got and where I have achieved has really put me in a good mindset. And then for the people who are looking at offering, I mean, I think that more could be done in mentoring. So, if you're in business, going out, finding universities where you can potentially offer some of your time or expertise, or some of the local high schools, seeing if there are any mentoring opportunities, and giving people an opportunity, even if they don't have the right necessarily the right skill set. Give like there's no harm, and the
Yeah.
impact that it'll make to a young person to have an opportunity is infinitely bigger than what we can imagine, because they're just starting out in their lives, and you're kind of a little bit dusty and hardened from all of the setbacks. And yeah, no, they're still bushy-eyed and what is it? Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Yeah.
And giving everybody those opportunities to keep that energy and motivation going, I think is really important.
Very, very cool. And I had never been in a mentoring scenario until fairly recently, when we were both working for TTI. And as a mentor, I found that extremely valuable, particularly, like in most of life, if you're willing to listen and learn from other people, learning from somebody closer to a third my age than it was really amazing because they had so many things to teach me that I wouldn't have had an opportunity to learn if I had, and I was supposed to be the one there teaching, but I found I learned. I hope they learned as much as I did. So,
Oh gosh, Rick, I don't know if you know this, but you're kind of like I've adopted you as one of my mentors. It's not official, but you are by far the most impressive revenue slash business person I have met in anywhere in the world in all my years. And but yes, I absolutely think that anybody who is following you, following the revenue culture, and how to put yourself, like how can you help people that are just starting out in sales or just new in their career, that that is always, I think, going to be infinitely more rewarding than getting a bonus. Like knowing that you affect positively other people's lives is such a cool feeling.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, Melissa, this has been as I expected it would be wonderful. And so, last thing, is there anything you'd like to leave us with? Any words of wisdom or pleas or suggestions or uh, challenges? Anything you want to leave with us?
Always push yourself to do something that scares you so that you can grow. So whether that's anything new. And I think that so many of us are sitting with like ideas and dreams that we're too fearful of putting out there. And so ideally starting something that you've always dreamed of, even if nobody's going to see it, although like just doing something that scares you, I think is good for us.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being here today. And for the audience, thanks for joining us. I'm sure this has been as exciting for you as it has for me, and hopefully we'll see you in 2 weeks for the next one.